Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of this show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Now, I'd like to again welcome everybody back to another episode. I'm honored to be able to do this show, of course. And I wanted to mention again that for those who are new to the show, that on Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which of course is a wide variety of subjects. So let's start with the so-called paranormal, for lack of a better term, the popular and controversial subject of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Now, the UFO conspiracy crowd, let's be polite and call them that. These are people who, to be blunt, don't think very critically where it concerns this subject. They have been beside themselves with joy recently because during the last couple of months, information has come out confirming what they have long suspected, which is that the U.S. government has continued to study the subject of unidentified flying objects in secret. And that, of course, is wonderful news to people who are interested in that subject, who have been saying for years, for some of them even decades, that the U.S. government has continued to study the subject ever since it officially closed Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force's more or less public relations exercise to formally study UFO reports that lasted several decades. Now, what I'm going to do is give you the reality check on this so that we separate fact from fiction, because that's also one of the things we like to do on this show. Now, let's talk about the subject of UFOs first. A lot of people are very sloppy in their terminology when they talk about UFOs. We must remember that a UFO is not automatically a flying saucer. In fact, the term UFO simply means unidentified flying object. If you see it, it's flying, and you cannot identify it, regardless of what it really is, you have just had a bona fide UFO sighting. Now, of the UFO reports that are on record, some 80 to 90% of them are really what we call IFOs, identifiable flying objects. They may not always be identified, but they're absolutely not extraterrestrial spacecraft visiting the Earth. In fact, even though I myself have had a sighting of an object I still can't explain all these many years later, and I saw it in the presence of two other witnesses, what I saw was not definitive enough nor detailed enough to conclusively say that whatever it was in the sky, that it separated into two pieces, if you will. Details of my sighting we can talk about later, maybe next week in another episode. I still can't say it was from another planet. I can't say it was a spaceship loaded with aliens, because the nature of my sighting was such that I just can't do that unless I'm going to lie, and I'm not going to do that to you. I saw the object at night. It was what we call a nocturnal light sighting, and I was one of many people who saw it, especially over the next several weeks in the Bay Area in 1981, Bay Area in Northern California. And there was a little bit of a UFO wave, if you want to call it, or what we call a mini flap. That is a disproportionately or unusually high number of sightings over a very fixed or finite period of time. So while I can say I've seen a UFO, what I cannot say with honesty is that I've seen men from outer space or a spaceship from another world. Now, getting back to the recent announcement several months ago, a few months ago, that the U.S. government had secretly studied UFOs during the presidency of Barack Obama, unfortunately, UFO conspiracy nuts have read into this news development much more than really exists. Now, I will tell you, and I know this for a fact, and this is very easily verifiable, that if the U.S. government receives a report of a unidentified flying object, especially from a military observer or a pilot, even a commercial pilot, if they think that that sighting is interesting enough or can provide enough details that warrant further investigation, they're going to do it. Every sane country would do that. In fact, the job of the Air Force is to protect and guard the airspace. It's kind of obvious. So the idea that the government would investigate UFO cases. Well, as other documents from other countries have proven, these include countries like Great Britain or United Kingdom. They've released hundreds or thousands of pages of material proving that over the years, well after Project Blue Book closed, they continued to study UFO reports secretly when they felt they were justified in doing so. Now, in the case of the United States, during Barack Obama's presidency, we had former Nevada Senator Harry "La Liberal" Reid. He went ahead and said we should spend some money to find out if what people are reporting might merit some value. Because Reid believed there were two possibilities to explain some of these sightings, which appear at first glance to be perhaps unexplainable. Again, first cursory glance. It would take a detailed analysis or investigation of a report to be able to say that with more affirmative, a more positive stance, if you will, a more firm conclusion. So what he did is apparently some $20 to $25 million were spent. The program went on for a very short period of time, at least by American bureaucratic standards, and then, if you believe the official reports, it was canceled. So after spending about 25 million bucks, it was closed. Now, why was it closed? Because the fact remains, and this is my main point for even covering this subject on the opening segment here, is that after all this money was spent, some would say wasted, nothing was found to prove that aliens were visiting us. So what were the objects reported? It depends on the case. And in some of these, we'll never know. Some of them could have been Russian or Chinese advanced aircraft. And that was one of the reasons that Harry Reid wanted this done, because if Russia or China has something, new going on, we need to know that as a country, because we are at war with them in certain ways. No one is firing nuclear weapons, but there are other types of wars that are going on, both ideologically, the war and fight for global opinion and swaying people around the world to believe your message. A lot of countries do this, and of course economically. And ever since society has become much more globalized, thanks to things like the internet, the real bullets, if you will, today are pretty much with dollars or economics or whatever currency is being used as ammunition, so to speak. China, for example, we're talking again about communist China, which is really totalitarian capitalist China. They're going to start buying their oil in their own currency and get off the so-called petrodollars, because the more they can harm the United States, the sooner they can become what they have been shrewdly working for and working on, which is their long march to be the world's only superpower. The only problem is the United States is standing in their way, and they're doing everything they can, short of nuclear war and physical war, to expedite the day when the United States is no longer the world's only superpower, but communist China is instead. And we'll get back to that during the second segment here. So to go back to the subject of UFOs, yes, it's kind of exciting, I guess, in theory, that the government is poking around again officially in UFO cases or studying them, or at least reports of them. But at the end of the day, what matters is what was found. And what was found? Nothing. Now, when I say nothing, what I mean, again, is a smoking gun proving that aliens from the Pleiades or wherever have been visiting us, and that has not happened. So, if you believe the government, the program was shut down. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But this entire development seems to have given new life to the terminal case. It was on its last bottle of oxygen, so to speak, that there was this cosmic Watergate, which is a ridiculous term since Watergate was a political problem. It was not a national security problem. So the very idea of calling it a cosmic Watergate is ridiculous. The metaphor doesn't really fit, but it's widely used. And again, at the end of the day, depending on the case you want to look at in detail, it has been everything from secret aircraft from Russia to China to we don't know. Okay, and just because we don't know doesn't prove it came from outside the Earth. So please don't fall victim to the so-called internet ufologists, those who don't remember the old days, those who don't think about this subject critically. And I'll tell you, I'll be very blunt with you because I tend to be that way. I'm not politically correct. I don't believe in that. If there was ever any, I repeat, any evidence that we were visited by aliens and there was a smoking gun case and we could say, yep, they came from Zeta Ridiculous or wherever, I would be the first to admit that's the truth. I don't have an ego in this. And it wouldn't bother me if my own book exposing the Billy Meyer UFO cult or even the Roswell UFO crash and that whole myth, if those books were ever disproven to where, yes, Roswell involved the secret recovery of an alien spacecraft and Billy Meyer really is having sex or talking to Semyazi, I would be the first to congratulate him and say, please forgive me. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I take back everything I said and God bless you. And you can hold me to that if those days should ever happen. But I predict, with my lack of psychic abilities here, and I admit I have no magical psychic powers, unlike other people who claim they do, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay? That's my prediction based on logic and facts. No psychic powers needed, especially when you don't have them. So once again, to recap, before we go to the station break here, this whole recently announced government reinvestigation of UFOs is much ado over nothing. They did spend millions of dollars because governments love to do that, especially the United States. It was Harry Reid's brain fart that got the thing going. He was actually genuinely curious over what was being reported, but what came back was nothing from outer space. Okay, we'll be back after the commercial break here on Kal's Corner, and we'll get into communist China and the trade war that's now erupting between the U.S. and China.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is the one and only Rob McConnell. So, folks, we talked about UFOs and the non-event there. Let's now switch to something much more grounded in reality here, something that is going to affect consumers around the world, depending on how this plays out. And this is a trade war, which actually has been long overdue, that is now erupting between communist China and the United States. Now, I want you to understand something. When I say communist China, I use the term because that's how China describes itself. Karl Marx, however, and Vladimir Lenin would probably roll over in their graves if they saw the kind of so-called communism that China really does practice. In reality, there never has been a true communist country. It's never happened. It's never going to happen because it doesn't work. It can't work. Communism is responsible for killing more people, especially last century, than any other political system, and that's a fact. A lot of people think that the former Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler was one of the greatest mass murderers of all time. You're right to think that, but you have to put it in perspective, because Joseph Stalin, who was the communist dictator of the former USSR, or the leader of Russia, he murdered a lot more people, more than twice as many, than Adolf Hitler did. In fact, he murdered more people than all of the people who died in World War II. And that would include people the Japanese murdered. And, of course, people who died that we killed, as in the Americans when we dropped atomic bombs and things like that on Japan. So the greatest mass murderers in modern history have been the communists. And, you know, today, in today's world, you have these left-wing liberals, self-proclaimed progressives, who are really regressives because they don't understand the realities of some of these issues. They live in their own ivory towers. They're certainly not like the progressives that I grew up with, in the 60s and the 70s, when you could actually halfway reason with them. They were right about the Vietnam War, for example, that we shouldn't have been there, meaning the United States, and should have never fought that war. But you fast forward to today, the so-called millennial generations with their smartphones, and the most exercise they get every day is just working their thumbs on their touchscreens. And it's amazing that they have become very intolerant and regressive. Now, regressive means you're intolerant. You don't tolerate other people's views. Hillary Clinton, for example, is a good example of this. She called Trump supporters basically deplorables. And I know a lot of people who voted for Trump. In fact, I'm one of the few journalists who never swallowed the Obama Kool-Aid, and I predicted Trump would win because I understood the mood of enough Americans, fellow Americans, since I am American, born and raised in the U.S., and I predicted Trump would win based on my understanding of their mood, and people were tired of the same old shtick. They wanted to try something different, even if it involved electing a reality TV host and a playboy or billionaire playboy and whatever else you want to call Donald Trump. So now that he's president, things, of course, haven't gone as people expected. That's both good and bad, depending on the subject. And now Trump is taking on an issue which a lot of people have known about but did nothing about for too long, and that is dealing with China. You know, the United States has a trade deficit with China of over $300 billion. That's a lot of money, even by American standards. Why is it that way? It's that way because no politicians bothered to do anything to stop China and to balance that out when they could have and should have years ago. In fact, I'll be very blunt with you. It was the presidency of Bill Clinton that sold out the country essentially to the Chinese. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and it's a true story. I used to work at the Boeing Company in Renton, Washington. I lived in, of course, the Puget Sound area for a couple of years. And after I left Boeing, I went to Europe and lived there for 10 years. And I remember very clearly one day being in Fred Meyer Market, and I ran into some friends who worked at Boeing, and they didn't work in my department. They worked in a different department. So we ran into each other. And this couple who worked at Boeing had left the company. And I asked him point blank, I said, why are you leaving? You know, Boeing's a pretty secure gig. They got pension, retirement, so on. Well, I was told that I should wake up and smell the roses and understand that the future is Asia, not the West. And not only is it demographics and babies, meaning the population boom is much bigger outside of so-called white Western Europe and the United States, but that also this new thing called call centers is exploding in India and in Asia. And they had basically left Boeing to start their own call centers, and they were going to laugh all the way to the bank. And they talked about how Microsoft and all these other companies were opening these up, and that this was the future. And when I heard this, I thought they were kind of oversimplifying the issue. But over time, what they said to me years ago in 1999 proved to be true. If you try calling many tech support centers nowadays, or so-called call centers, the person who answers it probably has a foreign accent. In fact, I've heard a lot of Americans complain to me that when I try to get help on the phone, I can't understand the person who's talking to me because I don't understand the accent. Now, that issue aside, having lived in India when I moved there after spending 10 years in Europe, I can tell you there's a bunch of call centers. I ran into many people. I have friends who work at them, and of course, they're Indians in India, and they're servicing companies in the West, all over Europe, and so on. So what caused China to become so powerful economically is basically stupidity from the West. And the reason I call it stupidity is because that's what it really is. Now, I want you to think of the principle here. When you pay an enemy to destroy you, you are redefining the concept of pure stupidity. Now, let's think this through for a moment and talk about this, because if you don't get your head around this, there's no point in continuing this segment. And of course, we're going to do that. Imagine that you are a communist country. Chairman Mao murdered more people than Stalin did. You can look that up. In fact, if you go to Guinness Book of World Records, you will see in this order, the greatest mass murderer in history was Chairman Mao, Joseph Stalin, Genghis Khan, Hitler's fourth or fifth, depending on how you do the math. And you have a country that after Mao finally died, and thankfully he died, I have no wish to see a mass murderer live, they made a huge change in China, especially after they saw, much to their horror, the former comrade country, Russia, the USSR, implode because of their economic stupidity. China decided to become a totalitarian, capitalistic society. And what I keep hearing from naive Americans who consider themselves to be liberals and progressives is how, wonderful China is. But yet none of these people will go live there and actually tell you how it is, or try to get on a blog or start a Facebook page, because Facebook isn't allowed over there. Google isn't allowed over there. Well, those companies are not allowed there because that would blow holes in the censorship and the repressiveness of the Communist Party and its newly minted or sanctioned dictator, Xi Jinping. You must remember that recently they changed their own constitution so that this dictator can run for as long as he wants to, as well as his successor, the so-called president or vice president of China. So what's happening is that they have legally, according to their system, changed the constitution so that Xi Jinping is now dictator for as long as he wants a job, or until somebody overthrows him. And the reason they've done that is because he wants to live and stay long enough in power to execute both what they call their 2020 plan, that's not my name for it, as well as their 2050 plan. And this is why the things are happening now between China and Trump, because Jinping had to go ahead and get this mandate to stay in power forever, much in the same way that Putin has won re-election in Russia. So he's going to go out on top. He's got, he doesn't have the rest of his life to run unless they change the constitution. But in China, that's what's going on. So what China has done is the Chinese leaders were smart enough after Chairman Mao died and after they saw Russia implode to say, well, we need to do it differently or we're going to join them. So what did they do? They started contacting the West and saying, look, we can build your stuff cheaper than anybody. And you can then really laugh all the way to the bank with those profits. And greedy companies who don't care about human rights, they don't care about the quality of work standards, signed up faster than you could measure it. And all these years later, what China has done is they've taken all this money that Western countries have paid them to build their stuff cheaply. And with that cash, China has modernized its infrastructure. In many places, they have built up their military. So if you look at the dynamics of that, imagine that you and I are enemies. I want to destroy you. And what I'm going to do is take money from you so that I can put all the pieces in place so that one day I do destroy you. Whether it's with my military or my technology or my money, you're not going to be around anymore. I'm going to be the king of the hill. And that's exactly what China is doing. So Jinping has been one of the key architects of this to fast track it compared to his predecessors. It also takes time to do all this stuff. China has a lot of people in it. And after this break here, what we'll do is give you the short version of what they're planning, and then we'll end the show with our tribute to the late Dr. Stephen Hawking. We'll be back after this break.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, They conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment now of Kal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, the executive producer is Rob McConnell. Now, getting back to Communist China, we have to start with what is called their 2020 plan, okay? Now, their dictator, Jinping, his 2020 plan calls for no less than the final subjugation and conquest by military force, if necessary, of the island nation of Taiwan. Now, the communists who ruled China with an iron fist have always regarded Taiwan as being a rogue province. During the years of Jinping's brutal reign, mainland China has systematically increased its control over Taiwan, while Jinping's henchmen have tightened control of Chinese society overall. Now, briefly, and this is a short version of their 2020 plan, and we know this because the actual files of this plan, the military details have been leaked. As many as 500,000 military troops, according to their 2020 plan, will invade Taiwan, attacking it on at least 16 different points. Now, Taiwan, of course, is an island. They will unleash what is essentially a blitzkrieg-style integrated operation consisting of an onslaught of as many as 1,000 missiles fired at Taiwan, overwhelming its defenses, backed up by piloted aircraft, remote-controlled drones, ocean-based vessels, and underwater firepower from new generation Chinese submarines. Now, the idea that China has is to seize Taiwan as fast as possible, especially before opposing Japanese, American, and Allied forces can respond with any significant counterattack or blockade. Now, once China gains a significant toehold in Taiwan, it will be nearly impossible to dislodge it, especially after it sends in vital reinforcements and effectively controls the region's airspace and surrounding waters. Now, any significant attempts by the United Nations to rein in China at this point will be useless. Remember, China sits on the UN's euphemistically called Security Council, and it will simply veto any punitive actions attempted against it. It may even win the support of Russia because its grand plans are not being opposed by Russia in exchange for larger cooperative economic considerations. Now, this brings us to probably the only sane country in that area, India, okay? Now, to prove how backwards, I'm going to be very blunt with you, to prove how backwards, irrelevant, and inept India's military, despite it being presently overhauled, has now become, now this is after spending billions of dollars in upgrades, Indians may take pride in knowing that presently, and this is a fact, folks, think about this, the country of Saudi Arabia, which has just, it's small, it has just 32 million people in it, versus India's much larger population of nearly 1.3 billion people. Saudi Arabia now outspends India where it concerns upgrading its military. Can you believe this? I mean, India is the size of all of the European Union. It's got 1.3 billion people, and it spends less money on its military than Saudi Arabia now does. Now, this is nothing to be proud of. In fact, India has now lost whatever chance it once ever had, and never had one because it didn't care, to be a credible deterrent to China. And China now doesn't take India serious anymore as far as being a military foe because there's no need to. China now has a stealth fighter. India has stealth nothing, okay? And I've written as a reporter and a journalist from India. It was very controversial to do it, but I had to tell the truth on how inept these upgrades have been from the India's military. India tried, as I documented in one article, to invent their own indigenous assault rifle for the military to use so they could make it on their own and give it to their troops. It took them 7 years to do it, and they still didn't get it done. So they're buying weapons from the U.S. and Israel now. God bless them for buying stuff that works. But let's be honest. Anybody who spent 7 years working on a rifle that has half a brain could do it in 7 years' time because the mechanics are the same. You got gunpowder, you got a bullet, you got a clip, you got a spring, you got a firing pin, you got a barrel, you got a stock. Come on, there's nothing magic here. So now that China has effectively gone way ahead of India, and India doesn't seem to want to be a superpower or stop China, but it will complain about China. China will, unless they're stopped, or if China changes their mind, they will, by the year 2020, which is not that far away, they will go ahead and try to take Taiwan. If they can do it by not firing a shot, that's the Chinese way, they'll do it. But today in the paper, it's one of the reasons we're talking about this, it was predictable that now that Jinping has got his mandate for the rest of his life, or as long as he wants the job of dictator, the Chinese media, which he controls, is now saying that Taiwan better be careful because the U.S. is sending a high-level delegation to talk directly with the Taiwanese, and that bothers the Chinese because Trump's attitude is that Taiwan is Taiwan and China is China, and if Taiwan wants to be independent, they have that right. China does not have the right to try to conquer them. China doesn't agree with that. So China has openly now, as of today, I've read the articles, warned Taiwan that there's going to be war because Taiwan's leader is pro-independence. However, as I also reported last week in the Daily World newspaper, there was an election in Taiwan where most of the people who essentially run that country are now pro-Beijing puppets. So if China can rein in Taiwan by not having to fire a shot, so much for the better from their point of view. But make no mistake about it, folks, they're serious about taking Taiwan as step one of step two to execute what is then the bigger plan, which is called the 2050 plan. Now, the 2050 plan is this. It is China's long march to conquer the world and become the world's only superpower. Okay? That's what it's designed to do, and they are serious. Now, in order to be a superpower, you have to have access to resources. And not coincidentally, we have to remember that in 2015, this was during the wonderfully on top of it presidency of Barack Obama, China became the world's largest economy in order to help solve the financial crisis that was caused by the Democrats and the Republicans. Obama even borrowed billions of dollars from China. Well, he did. Okay, so China not only became the largest economy in 2015, during 2016, it imported 54% of the world's aluminum, 48% of the world's copper, 22% of the world's corn, 31% of the world's cotton, 23% of the world's gold. Them and India are the gold hoarders of the world. 40% of the world's supply of lead, 50% of the world's nickel, 12% of the world's oil, 30% of the world's rice, which is ironic since they grow it, 45% of the world's steel, 46% of the world's tin, 17% of the world's wheat, and 47% of the world's zinc. Okay? Not only that, China's been buying up every mineral right they can get their hand on that is part of what they consider to be strategic minerals. In Afghanistan, they have locked up the mineral rights by spending some $3.5 billion just to mine copper. And they've also been spending billions more dollars in Africa to go ahead and lock up precious minerals and elements there. And Africa serves China's interests very well because Africa doesn't care about high labor standards or decent standards of living. Where would Africa be today, let's be blunt, if there was no contact with the West ever in history? Well, they wouldn't be industrialized, at least it seems to be that way. So in Africa, China has already spent $100 billion investing in infrastructure projects and mining operations. And what they do is they then get all that raw stuff, they make cheap goods, and then they sell them back to Africa or they give them back to Africa. Again, you gotta love the business model that these totalitarian capitalists are doing. Now, one of the key main tentpole projects that China is doing is called their New Silk Road, or what they call the Maritime Silk Road. There's two different routes. China is now in the process of spending $1.4 trillion to go ahead and make a series of roads and through 20 different countries. They've already spent at least $50 billion on it so far. And what they are doing is they're planning to make trade routes that go all the way from Western Europe. We're talking about starting in Rotterdam. And the trade routes go all the way across the continent of Europe and end up in China, of course. One of the things they're doing is a high-speed rail system where you will be able to travel by a high-speed train from Beijing, China, all the way to London in just 2 days. They are also doing the same thing by having ships come from Italy, go down through Athens, go through the Suez Canal, go through Kenya, then go across up to the coast of India, then along to Malaysia, and then up the coast of China. And that's the Maritime Silk Road. Now, no country has ever been this ambitious for setting up trade routes. China is doing it, just like they're building all the infrastructure in Pakistan. Otherwise, Pakistan would have even less than it does now. They control not only entire ports, they're literally building rail lines and superhighways that go from Afghanistan and Pakistan all the way to Beijing. And that's going to give China control of so much minerals and wealth that economically, who's going to stop them? The only way they're going to be stopped is if the West unites against China and tries to contain it, but they're not going to do it because at the end of the day, companies are greedy. They don't mind slave labor as long as it's in someone else's country, so they're not legally liable. They want to make their goods cheap so that they maximize profits. And of course, we've seen that there are more billionaires now, and the elite control most of the wealth in this world to levels never seen before in human history. There's nothing positive in that. In fact, it's outright shameful, and it is guaranteed to implode at one point. We'll be back after the commercial break, and then we'll talk about Dr. Stephen Hawking.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes. finds a locket or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Kal's Corner, here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show, as I've said, is Rob McConnell. Now, let's finish China real quick, real short. Today, as I broadcast this, about 1% of the elite control a little over half the planet's wealth. In the United States alone last year, the latest statistics that I have as of today is that 17,000 more people became millionaires. I wasn't one of the 17,000. Neither was anybody I know. But anyway, the point is that the economic gap between the rich and the poor is getting worse. And the middle class continues to shrink all over many countries. And that is a recipe for guaranteed disaster. So things cannot continue the way they are. But I predict, with the absence of my psychic powers, that things will get a lot worse before they get better. And it's unfortunate that human history tends to be that way. It seems like humans are more reactive than proactive. Look at the number of times that World War II could have been avoided if somebody had only bothered to stop Hitler. But no, we had to go for the stupid, ridiculous view of peace in our time, which was, it wasn't. It led to World War II because it was too late to stop Hitler. So finally, when they had no choice, the Western powers got off their butts and finally did something. And as a result of that, a lot more people died that would have been alive if people had only done the right thing from day one. And it's going to happen the same thing here. And economics, if economic wars, and if they're not handled right, do kill people. All right, let's switch to another subject. This is the passing of the scientific legend, if you will, Dr. Stephen Hawking. I'm going to tell you at least my perspective on it. Now, I found out about Stephen Hawking's death when an alert came to my iPhone from the Center for Inquiry in Pakistan. Now, the Center for Inquiry used to be known by other acronyms such as CSICOP, the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. I support that organization 100%. I'm honored that I've had books published by a publishing arm associated with them, Prometheus Books, because they publish nonfiction exposés of paranormal nonsense. And we do need critical thinking in this world, especially more so today than ever before. If you don't think critically, you're doomed. That's my view. So I got this alert from Pakistan, of all places. Now this, to me, is evidence of how globally connected the world has become, because I got this alert on my iPhone from my friend Mohammed Idris. He posted on his social media page that Stephen Hawking had died. And let me tell you what he wrote. I'll read it here. He said, "Rest in peace, Stephen Hawking. No words to explain your great work you've done for humanity." And he's right, okay? Now, after I digested the shock of Hawking dying, shock meaning it's always a shock when someone you admire does die. I'm surprised he lived as long as he did, considering his medical conditions, which were terminal. He was originally diagnosed to live only 3 years when doctors diagnosed his condition, which is essentially Lou Gehrig's disease. I found it ironic that this message should come from Pakistan because it didn't come from the New York Times. Pakistan beat them to it. And I know about Pakistan because of having lived in India. A lot of India's problems are caused by Pakistan, combined with Indian politicians refusing to do anything about putting Pakistan in their place and solving those problems and making Pakistan pay the price for supporting terrorism and murdering innocent people. A lot of people don't know this because it doesn't make the news, folks, but I'm not exaggerating. It is common in a single year in India for hundreds, at least one incident a day, where Pakistan will fire mortar shells or artillery across the borders into India, hoping to kill innocent people. And it's such a common occurrence that even the Indian press doesn't cover it on a regular basis. Shame on them. Even more shame on the politicians who just refuse to act like Israel does. Israel, when rockets are fired at it or it's attacked, they will hunt the offenders down and get rid of them. And that's what you have to do. But India's a coward where it concerns that issue. That's always been my opinion, because I've seen the effects of what happens when they don't do anything. And of course, the rare occasion when they do go across the border and eliminate the source of the attack. So I found it ironic that Pakistan, of all places, should be telling me about his death, because Pakistan is such a religiously hardcore, radical Islamic country that even now, when you work for the government, you have to declare under the new laws your religious affiliation. And that can get you killed if it's not Muslim. If you insult the Quran in Pakistan, it's a death penalty. That's it. That's the way it is. There's no tolerance and love and peace and forgiveness there. And Pakistan is a failed country. Let's be blunt about it. What little it has wouldn't exist if it weren't for China. And China is only interested in propping up Pakistan to extract from it what it can. Plus, it uses Pakistan as a belligerent factor to poke India in the eye, the same way it uses North Korea to mess with the United States and Japan. They're called proxy countries. So I heard about the news of Stephen Hawking, and I've always admired his work. He was born on October 8, 1942 in Oxford, England, and his parents moved from London to Oxford because it was safer to have a family there, because the Nazis were not bombing Oxford the way they had attacked London, of course, which is Great Britain's capital. Now, Hawking has parallels to another scientific great, Albert Einstein, in that they were both a bit rebellious in their youth. And in Einstein's case, for example, the teachers blew him off as somebody who wasn't fit for higher education. But yet in his mid-20s, Albert Einstein had figured out the theory of relativity in his spare time while working in a Swiss patent clerk office capacity, and then won a Nobel Prize. So Einstein peaked in his mid-20s. In the case of Stephen Hawking, at the age of 21, his life would change, because he was then diagnosed with a terminal neuronic disease, what we call Lou Gehrig's disease is a common nickname. And the medical experts gave him just about 3 to 4 years to live. That's it. He became very focused at that point, much more serious. But Hawking proved that the experts were wrong, because he would go on to make their prediction wrong, as in disprove it, by living another 52 years after he was originally diagnosed. And what's interesting and rather just one of those interesting, call it a coincidence or a parallel, if you will, since science doesn't really believe in coincidences. Instead, it's cause and effect. Stephen Hawking died at age 76, the same age that Einstein died. Okay? In fact, he died the same day that Einstein was born, on March 14th. That's rather interesting, too. What are the odds? Now, what I want to talk about with Dr. Stephen Hawking, I'm not going to rehash what he claimed about black body radiation, black holes, things like that. You can Google that. I have nothing new or original to add about that. I'm nowhere near an expert on them that he certainly was. But what I do want to talk about is what I noticed about him in the last few years, because the media has kind of softballed the issue, and I think that that's an injustice. I will tell you that over the last few years, after admitting his original so-called scientific breakthrough was wrong on black holes, Stephen Hawking began to make predictions that were rather a mixture of science and, to be blunt, pseudoscience. These weren't his finest moments. And this still makes him an incredibly great man, much more smarter than most people will ever be. And of course, I have to throw myself in that mix, meaning he's much smarter than I'll ever be, of course. But I have to say that I can disprove some things he said from this point of view, and let me explain it here. Stephen Hawking had written some material that he claimed disproved or showed evidence that God does not exist. Well, it didn't do any such thing. You can't prove a negative. That's a key rule in science. So while he presented evidence that there was nothing magical or godlike, for lack of a better term, for the creation of the universe, there's one issue that science still can't solve out of many, and that is, how did all of this stuff magically know how to put itself together if it wasn't designed or planned, and it all just works and counterbalances each other. Okay? Let's look at the issue of a simple bird. Birds eat fruit and they digest the seeds. They fly away, and when they excrement on the soil, the seeds go out of their body, and that's how one way that trees spread over a geographic area. How does a cobra know how to control its venom that it gives out to the things it wants to kill? Why is there always a prey and a predator and a counter predator? Look at the shark, for example. A dolphin will kill it very quickly. So you look at this incredibly integrated nature here, where you have a point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. You look at simple things like, human beings, they're predators. I keep trying to tell my liberal, vegan, vegetarian, naive types, you are a omnivore. You were designed, thank God, to digest both meat and fruits and vegetables. Don't tell me you were not designed to eat meat, because your eyes are in the front of your head. Well, you don't think for one moment you were designed to hunt apples on a tree. You look at a wolf, you look at a dog, you look at a cat, you look at a bear, they're predators. You look at prey, rabbits, chickens, deer, their eyes are on the side of their head. Cows even, as I try to tell my Indian friends, because they don't eat cows or beef as a rule. It's illegal actually in most of India. It'll get you a 7-year prison sentence because they think these are gods, and they're not gods, they're animals. So the point here is that Hawking could not explain how all this stuff magically managed to structure itself. And until science can explain that, there's a huge hole in the idea that this has no design at all and that it's just a random result of collisions that occurred randomly. I don't buy it. That's my view. We'll be back next week with another episode of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.